Fran Lab. There was even an article, it's just this weekend, article in the Times magazine, Hobby Horse. This was about the fact that, I'll just read from the start of the article. It says, hobbyists used to avoid talking politics. Tariffs changed that, by Adeline Jackson, who wrote this article. It's pretty interesting. It's not a long article, but it was really about people on YouTube and bloggers and podcasters, particularly those in the music business who do like guitar gear reviews, like pedals, guitars, modding guitars, stuff like that. They've all been chiming in some version of the fact that the tariff war is going to kill the guitar industry, because the music industry, it's so dependent on Asia. Like with Frantone, I did everything that I could in the US. I had my circuit boards manufactured here at tremendous cost. I sourced all my parts here at tremendous cost. I worked with the American distributors. I had got as many American parts as I could, but as much as I tried to make it an American product, getting my cases machined here, getting them coated here, getting them screened here, doing everything on the continent that I could, there was the reality that virtually all the components were being made in Asia. That you had to buy the switches from China. Even if you bought them from an American company, they'd be made in Asia. You had to get your knobs and your potentiometers and your resistors and all the chips and everything be made overseas. Even if you bought a Texas Instruments chip, they would be made in Malaysia or Singapore or Taiwan or whatever. There's just no way of getting around it. If you make anything in electronics, you're going to be subject to the tariffs. So, with the pedal business, the profit margins were really low because I was selling wholesale, and the best wholesale prices I could give, the margins were really slim. I made very little on a pedal that I sold to a dealer that would sell at retail. So with the tariffs, unless the public is completely willing and okay with paying twice as much for gear as they were a year ago, which I'm sure they're not, the article was basically saying that so many of these influencers are of the opinion that the tariff war could very well kill big portions of the music gear business. I certainly have no doubt that it's definitely going to cull the ranks of pedals, because, like I said, margins on pedals are so narrow, particularly if you're going through retailers, that retailers like the big sellers, they're not going to double their retail prices. They do want to sell product, but they're also not going to offer manufacturers like better margins. So the dealers are always going to make their money, and they're going to sell at a certain price point that they establish, and they're going to say, if we buy your product, we're going to buy it at this price. That's what the dealers say. And so what's going to happen is they're simply going to stop buying products that are too expensive or that the manufacturers want to raise the prices on. They simply won't buy them. And one of the things about the tariff war too, with importation, is people have this idea, the tariffs, that just means that you're just going to have to pay more for the parts, and companies are going to have to eat the parts, and that's boo-hoo to you if you're a maker and you're buying parts from China. Why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that anyway. Well, it's like I have yet to hear the opinion of someone actually with skin in the game saying that they love the tariff war. It's always some anonymous comment saying, you can't just keep buying from China, we need to do this. Like, who are you? Where do you live? Are you even in America? Well, probably not, almost certainly not. But I have yet to have a comment from someone saying, I'm a manufacturer, I have a dozen employees, and we buy $1 million worth of parts from China, and we're totally in favor of these tariffs, and this is exactly what we should be doing. No, you're not going to hear that, because anybody who's got a business, anyone who's manufacturing anything, you're beholden to companies. There literally is no other option, and a tariff war is not going to create industry in the United States. That's just not how it works. It's never worked that way. You know, if we were to bring all manufacturing back to the United States, which is never going to happen, it would take 15 to 20 years to do it. Not months, decades. It takes decades to move industries back. It took decades to move them offshore, and you don't just start up industry. Who's going to do these jobs? Who's going to work in all these manufacturing jobs? Americans, for the most part, don't want to do assembly line manufacturing work for low wages. They don't want to work in some sweaty place where they're doing a repetitive task. Americans tend not to want to get those jobs. That's why they were moved overseas so easily with so little protest. 30, 40 years ago, yeah, people loved doing manufacturing jobs. When I was in my 20s, I was in retail, and then when I moved from retail, I went into manufacturing, and I worked for companies that did assembly line manufacturing, and I spent my 20s and 30s overseeing production lines that did electronics manufacturing and everything. But these days, and we're talking 2025, Americans won't do those jobs. They really won't. There certainly are not millions of Americans that will do dangerous, hot, sweaty manufacturing jobs. Where are these people going to come from? Where are these factories going to go? My big problem with the whole thing is, number one, there's no one more in favor of bringing manufacturing back in America than me. I had an American manufacturing company, and I wanted to do it all in America. But that's not the problem. The problem is, who's going to do that work? What companies are going to build those factories? Who's going to operate the machines? I mean, we don't have people by the millions going to Votech to learn machinist skills. We don't have millions of people wanting to solder all day, work a lathe all day, punch sheet metal all day. Yes, we do have some people that want to do that work, but not enough. Like, by several orders of magnitude, not enough. That's the real problem, is that where are the workers, And, in Asia, these production line kind of companies, and if you've ever seen pictures of Asian factories, these massive, massive buildings where, tens of thousands of people are working at tables, there's really nothing like that in America. And there wouldn't really be, because the workers to do that work are not here. It's just like in agriculture. They're getting rid of migrant farm workers with deportations and raids and such. And so many comments whenever I talk about that are like, well, they shouldn't be here. Well, I guess you should pay. Why should we buy cheap food? Why should we have cheap food if it means that we're not employing Americans to do the work? It's like, okay, Mr. Anonymous person making it, who are these people that want to work these fields? That's when I talked about the experiment in the 60s where they tried to get high school kids to work on farms when they deported all of the migrant farm workers, and it was an absolute disaster. Because where are the millions, literally millions of Americans who want to work picking crops? Where are they? The jobs are there. No, Americans won't do that work. That's why we're in this pickle, And so the idea that this tariff war is not going to end, I'm really worried. I mean, it looks like at the very least it's going to extremely damage entire industries. The maker industries, small businesses, small manufacturers, they're going to go out of business. Like I said, I was going to get back into manufacturing this year, but it's the more I do the numbers, it's freaking impossible. There's just no way I could do it with the tariff war. And the catch-22 in this is that it's not just a matter that things like parts that you have to order from Asia are going to be more expensive. It's not even a matter of that. There was an article, the global postal traffic to U.S. plunges by 81% as tariff exemption expires. This is because there had been, an exemption on anything that you imported to the U.S. that was $800 or less. That was the cutoff, right? And it says here, according to preliminary data from 192 member countries, the Universal Postal Union said Saturday, this was a few weeks ago, that traffic coming into the United States, this is all mailed traffic, is letters, parts, parcels, everything that's coming into the United States has declined by 81% as of August 29th. It was called the de minimis exemption, expired on the 29th. Low-value parcels are now subject to the 10 to 50% levy that coincides with the tariff rate of the country of origin, or a flat rate of $80 to $200 depending on which option the merchant chooses. So again, it depends on the options that the sender mailing to the United States chooses. They can choose to go the percentage route or the flat fee, blah, blah, blah. But the receiver, the recipient in the U.S. is the one who pays that fee. But the new rules place a burden of customs duty collection and remittance on transportation carriers or the U.S. Customs and Border approved third parties, which again, tariffs have been put in place, but there's no rules in place about who collects it. That's the thing. Do you pay the UPS guy, or does UPS not even get the package because it's held up in U.S. Customs? And if it's in Customs, well, that's in major ports. So we've got customs ports in, at Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, a few major ports. And so do you physically have to go to the customs office and pay your tariff, give them a check or give them cash? How do you even find out that your thing's being held up? Did they send you a letter? There's no rules. We don't have anything in place for that. And so it's just going to be utter chaos. I worry it's like that. That's why I can't restart manufacturing, because I can't order parts. You could spend thousands of dollars on parts that you're going to have to pay a tariff on, but you may not even get those parts because they get held up in customs. And how did they even get a hold of you? That's what I had to do when I lived in New York. Is the stuff came to the port, and I had to physically go there at the airport. To pick up my crates of parts. They don't make it easy. Like I said, we don't have a system to deal with that. It's total chaos. The article said that foreign manufacturers are simply not mailing products to the U.S. because of the tariff. They're simply not even shipping to the U.S. It may not even be a matter of the fact that the parts are going to be too expensive. You may not even be able to get them at all because of the tariff war. They simply may not even ship the part to you. In fact, there's really no system set up to collect these tariffs from individuals. So it's really just a mess. And, if it's going to continue months, years, or if it's just permanent, I don't know what we're going to do. It's going to take months to really add up. But I'm very worried. Very worried. Unfortunately, you buy anything from outside the United States, it's subject to tariffs, mega tariffs. And like I said, in Europe, people are used to dealing with, VAT and stuff like that. There are systems in place where, you're going to have to pay customs duties and stuff. But in the United States, we now have a tariff system, but we have no system for collecting those tariffs. So no one really knows how you're going to get your stuff. Like I said, does it end up hauled up in some locker at the U.S. Border and Customs Control? Does it sit in California waiting for you to pay a tariff? How do you even get notified? Do you get notified by mail that you got to pay a tariff, by check, and then sometime within the calendar year it'll be shipped to you? Nobody knows, because we don't have a system for it here. It's just like the executive branch just created tariffs, imposed them unilaterally without us even having a system to collect those tariffs. And also, now that the United States government is collecting all this tax on all these imports, nothing has been said about what will be done with this money. Where does it go? Basically, all this money, which I guess presumably is billions of dollars, is just going to go to the U.S. Treasury? Where all taxes go. What's going to be done with this money? Nothing's been said. It's just what we're paying a tax for, question mark, going to question mark. Who collects the tax? Where does it go? Who does it benefit? What is it going to be used to do? What are they going to spend all that billions of dollars of collected, tariff tax? What are they going to spend it on? They won't say.
Swear
the lab. Go berserk. In my lab, it's where I work. That's what you're watching. Friend lab. That's what I'm doing. Working at the bench again.